if you look at the Course of Miracles, then there's this idea of perception rather than honest or knowledge. Yeah. So perception, is, at least the way I understand it, is taken, everything that's taken through the mental system then is perception. It's rather than knowledge, meaning there's all of the information that's happening through the body is perceptive. In a way, you could say that then therefore it's untrue because it's a perception, meaning it's distorting reality. Yeah. Knowledge, therefore, like what we are as awareness, could be considered more as a listening. Whereas, like when you're hearing something, you're not so much replying to it. Yeah, it's not like I know information and then I'm outputting information. What we are is extremely receptive, maybe would be a word of saying it. Yeah, and there's no perception there. It's a very direct understanding, let's say, or receiving of what they would say in the course as knowledge. Yeah. But what is happening through the body then is perception, and then something else from the course that they would say is everything that you think or all of your perceptions are based on the past. Everything you see is based on the past. Yeah, so this is how the head you would utilize time. Because all of the perceptions that are currently happening, whether it be through sight, sound, thought, smell, taste, whatever's going on through conscious contact, is being perceived by the head through the lens of the past, meaning it takes information from the past and is putting it on your current, is interpreting current life through that past lens. That's a perception. We could also call that a distortion. At least I would call that a distortion. Yeah, because you're not getting a direct knowing or hearing of what's happening. Yeah. You're getting a translation of it. For a lot of people, that translation is fine, but for a lot of other people, that translation gets super uncomfortable. Yeah, because that perception, that perceived now through the past, yeah, is perceiving everything else in reference to the head. That's self-centeredness, yeah. So the perception is based on a self-centeredness. That mental system cannot not be self-centered. It's a self-centered system. Yes? The mental system holds self at the center. So when there's contact with the environment, again, through the senses or through thought or whatever the hell's going on, that contact is being claimed to be happening to you. What we call that you is self. Small s self, let's say, but in recovery the word is self. So we use the word self here. Yeah. Now the head is referencing everything else in relation to self. Now self, there is no self in the center of it. There's a mental process which is suggesting, yeah, or as Ramana would say, presupposing that there's a self, that there's an I, that there's a you, that all of this shit is happening to. Yeah. And now the head, the same thing, the same head that everything is seemingly happening to, yeah, is perceiving everything else through a past lens. So there's happening in life, there's events, there's all of this shit going on. All of that stuff is being perceived through a past lens to be happening to a you who doesn't exist. Yes? So there's the duality, the separation. There's a self here, and then there's a world there. That's let's say number one duality. Yeah? And that self, another thing they would say in the Course, is that for there to be a relation with the outside world, there needs to be a body that's in relation to other bodies. So the mental system is perceiving everything through a past lens as a self, which we would say is a body. Yeah. There's an awareness of all of this happening, but that awareness is getting completely taken over by that individuality, that mental movement, and absorbed into that self. Because the head is saying that there's a self that all of this is happening to. That's the trick. There's a self in the middle of it. but there is no self in the middle of it. So what the head has to keep doing is continually presenting perception, or let's say misperceptions of what's happening right now, in order to keep that ghost of self alive. Yeah. Because there is no self. It's imagination. This is the illusion of self. There's a bunch of mental happening. There's a bunch of perception or interpretation of what's going on. That interpretation is based on past. Yeah, it's referencing the past, let's say, to make sense of kind of what's happening now, or at least try to make sense of what's happening now. And it's misperceiving what's happening now through a past lens. It's doing that to what feels, or there's a sense of to you, to a self. Yeah, and that's really what non-duality is looking at, is that self and the absence of that self. Yeah, because the illusion is that the head is putting on this big show, let's say, to an audience that is no audience, but it's saying that you're the audience and that you as the audience is the self. Ah, sutta. There we go. There's current life happening. Yes? The head perceives that current life that's going on right now, puts it through a past lens. Now, if that past lens is you're less than, or you're a piece of shit, or whatever comes through, yeah, that past lens, then this is like where depression has landed for me in the past. The head presents an old idea, essentially. Yeah. And if I think that I am the head, that it's arising to me, I'm taking that old idea as being me, even though it's a misperception, which is based on the past. So that misidentification as a separate individual self seems very harmless, yeah? But it becomes very harmful if we're living under it, or living as it, we could say. Yeah. Because the freedom that comes from seeing that you're not that you're not the mental system which is doing the misperception or the interpretation of life. The thing is, there's nothing wrong with it, yeah? It's how the head works. It's perceiving the world in relation to itself because it's a self-centered system. You're not going to make that system not self-centered. It's a self-centered system. That's what it does. That's the function of the system. Yeah. So doing all kinds of things to make that system not be self-centered isn't going to work. At least it hasn't worked for me. Yeah. It's not what has paid dividends, really, for me. It's seeing that you're not that system. So then let it perceive and let it interpret. That's Maya. That's like the play of life, Lila, as they would say. Yeah. That's the whole thing. Yeah. Then there's an understanding that the world and the mind arise together, and the world and the mind set together. Yes. And you're in the world, but you're not of the world. You see? There's nothing wrong with it. Yeah. What seemingly becomes wrong is when we're identified as it. Yeah. And it's presenting false information. And that's when perception based on past evidence becomes really uncomfortable, and then we want to get out of that discomfort. Mm. Now, what happens then is we try to get out of that discomfort as that same system of self, and self can't get out of self. You see? So when the head tries to get out of the head, it can't get out of the head. And then it gets more uncomfortable. And I think that's when drug addiction and things and alcoholism really come into play. Is because they can't. The only way to seemingly shut the system off or get outside of the system is by like nuking it with something. Yeah. Now that doesn't last. The system recoups after the blackout or whatever, and it comes back online. Yeah. Yeah. So then it seems there's a seeming bondage of self, meaning there's a perceptive, the head is perceiving the world through a past lens and suggesting very strongly that that is arising to a you, a body. an individual body, which is also a perception, but whatever. That's what it feels like. That's the sense, is that it's arising to you. Yeah. Now that's the false identification that non-duality is looking for. It's it's not really looking at the arising. Yeah, it's important to see that the head is perceiving everything through this past lens, and it's painting what's going on right now as concepts, as ideas, so it can try to figure out its relationship to it, or what the hell's going on here. Yeah. There's nothing inherently wrong with it, but it does get very uncomfortable because it's self-centered. And we know that the mind of the addict or the alcoholic is hyper self-centered, meaning super self-centered. Yeah. Mm. And if you feel like it's arising to you, it seems like it's arising all the time, like it's incessant, constantly yelling what's not happening. Yeah. So then there's a want to get out of it. But if you're identified as that mental system, you're trying to get out of it as it. Yeah. Self can't get out of self. It doesn't work. It won't happen. Mm. Now the bondage of self then. Yeah, how can one get out of the bondage of self if one is identified as self? You can't do it. It's not going to happen. Yeah. You are bonded to self a lot if you're identified as it. Yeah. So what has really seemed to pay off for me is to see that all of that mental system that's arising is not is not me. It's not what I am. Yeah. So it's something which is after what I am. It's arising to something which is not a body and not a mind. Now, the Course, Miracles would call that knowledge, at least as far as I understand it, or God, or whatever. Yeah. What it's arising to. Knowledge or God doesn't have answers, doesn't have like output, let's say. Yeah, this is a good one because I got caught for a while in that thing of like, I know this message. Yeah, this body knows this message, so it can like prove it to other people or some shit. Yeah, but when you look at the Course, or you think about it through the lens of hearing or listening, when you're receiving, if you are receiving, yeah, it's not an output. It's like in Buddhism, they say lots of inflows, but there's no outflows. Yeah, so being the knower and trying to prove that you know shit, or judging others because they don't know, that's not it. That's not liberation at all. Actually, that's like bondage to self, bondage of self, because you're bonded to the knowing or the perceived knowing. That's the thing, is it's not knowing, it's perception. Yeah, so it's your knowing. It's very subjective and very dualistic. It's a trap, I think. I feel in the whole non-duality Advaita thing. Zen too, whatever. It's a trap. Yeah. Because from what you are, there's no outputs. There's no, it's not like a great way to be super productive in this world. It's a way to get free from self, not as self. Yeah. But it's super important to see this, that your head is perceiving everything through a past lens. Yeah, because it puts the head into context, and then you can see what you're not. Because you can see it doing it. You can see it constantly referencing the past or projecting to the future. That's the head in time. What that arises to is not in time. It's only now. It's right here. Yeah, and it doesn't have an opinion on the perception. To be honest, it doesn't give a shit about the perception. It doesn't matter what arises to what you are. What arises what arises. That's the play. Yeah. That's why I think Gangamira or Papaji or whatever would say, keep quiet, keep quiet. Yeah. So it's really important knowledge to see that the head, the mental system, is perceiving everything. Yeah, through a past lens. And then whatever arises in that head is perceiving it to a body. And it's making a strong suggestion or presupposing that there's a you that's all arising to, meaning that you are the body that it's arising to. And that's false. That is the false presentation that we're looking at in non-duality. It's not arising to a you. There's a bunch of shit happening, but it's not happening to a you. You see? So then we stop trying to change all of the happening and we simply see that it's not arising to you. And that's why negation is so useful and powerful. Yeah? Because through negation, seeing what you're not, there you are all the time. Before time and before space. Because the body and the head and the body are moving through time. Yeah? Past, future, whatever. They're moving through seemingly what is space. But what you are is not. It's before that. And that's where the freedom lies. That's where it lies. Yeah. And then the perceptive process, in my experience, slows down a lot. Because what is giving all of the truth to that perceptive process is us. It's what we are. And if we're listening to it and we're believing that it's what, if you're living as that perception, as what's being presented by the head, you're bound to self. And you're living under the bondage of self. You're bound to the idea of being in this body, and it seemingly feels like you're stuck and you can't get out. And that is the illusion of self, because there's no I at the center of all the happening. What you are is before the happening, not as a body and not as a mind. Yes? What we are. It's not just me or you. It's not. It's what we are. Yeah? Then there's a body and a mind arising within that, which we call individuality, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with the individuality or the body or the mind. Yeah, there's nothing wrong. Yeah, it's doing what it does, meaning that it's the self-centered system and it's going to be run on self-centered. It's in duality. It's going to be body, body. Yeah, but you're not that. The freedom comes from seeing that you are not that, rather than trying to change duality into a non-dual, non-thing. You can't take a thing that is dual and make it a non-dual, non-thing. It doesn't happen. It's above the pay grade of what it is. The body isn't going to become some super body, yeah, where light blasts out or some shit. It's a body. And the mind is going to keep perceiving. It's going to keep shooting its shot, let's say. It's not going to stop. That's what it does. Yeah. And there's a beauty in it, especially when you know that you're not it, you're before it. You're before it. So then the world isn't seen as a fearful, scary thing that's coming at you or for you. Yeah. You see that you're putting, the head is giving the world all the meaning that it has. And what is giving the head all the meaning is what you are as awareness. Ah, yes. So is it easier to try to change the head that's giving the world all the meaning that it has? Or is it easier to see that you're not the head and you stop giving so much meaning to what happens in your fucking brain? It's a lot easier to see that you're not the head and you're not the body. Yeah, because if you can see it, it's not you. The perceiver is not the perceived. Yeah. That's where the liberation lies. And then there you are, yeah? Ah, and there's not a lot of effort. There's no effort in that. As Gangamira would say, then just keep quiet. Just keep quiet. And then the knowing of that and the claiming of being the knower of that is all that same perceptive head. Let it keep claiming what it's going to claim.